Hey, welcome back to the Mining Pod. On today's show, we're joined by Tom Masiero of Standard Bitcoin to talk about all things Bitcoin mining in the Southeast United States. We recorded this show at the Nashville Energy and Mining Summit down at Bitcoin Park. Thank you to the Bitcoin Park team for making this possible. That was an awesome summit. I encourage everyone to try to go next year as well. Some awesome conversations there. We want to thank Foreman Mining for making this podcast possible. You'll hear from Foreman later in the episode. In today's show, we talk with Tom about mining in the Southeast, what it means for energy and infrastructure, and also a very counterintuitive take on why mining in Bitcoin might not actually be good for the energy grid. Okay, first a word from a few sponsors and then on to the show. Want to mine Bitcoin? Gator Mining offers premium hosting with as low as 1 unit per client, 95% uptime guaranteed, no curtailment, 24/7 monitoring and maintenance, in-house certified repair center, clean and renewable energy, all at competitive market rates. Work with an individualized team to get hash rate flowing your way today. Gator Mining, pioneering trustworthy crypto hosting for optimal mining success. Contact Gator Mining today at gatormining.ca. Bitcoin miners, be prepared. Hash rate is moving upstream towards power plants and low value energy. Don't get cut off. Modernize and mobilize your Bitcoin mining fleet today with Upstream Data's high performance load centers. Plug in Upstream Data's hash hut and monetize surplus wind power reliably in the blistering heat of West Texas. Plumb in hash generators and safely convert natural gas into cash in the frigid winters of northern Canada. Upstream offers high-quality load centers that will help you mine Bitcoin safely and reliably in every application and climate. Mobilize today and start mining upstream at upstreamdata.com. Are you a retail or institutional investor interested in Bitcoin mining companies? The Miner Mag brings you free data and analysis from all major NASDAQ-listed Bitcoin mining operations to know who stands out. Check out visualized metrics and data-dependent stories at theminermag.com. Tom, welcome to the Mining Pod.
What's happening, Will? It's been a long time coming.
It really has. We should have done this probably a while ago, but we had to wait for your ordinals moment to happen.
My ordinals moment.
And then we could tease everybody on the show. I think one of my favorite things is like people probably wouldn't think you as an ordinal person ever, and then you really came out hard for them.
Yeah. I'm an ordinals agitator more than anything. I'm like a big fan of it. Like my background with Great American Mining was like, we were kind of like a trolley account. We kind of pushed hard against, some of the narratives around, power consumption and things like that. And, so I'm like a big fan of like mimetic energy. And so like when the ordinal things happened, I was like, oh man, there's something like, you can't really touch it, but I knew it was like a very powerful kind of like mimetic tool. And especially for Bitcoin, and especially I was excited because in the bear market, it was being born. And like, typically in my experience, like when things get like kind of hatched in bear markets, they have time to like, get right. And so I was like, oh man, this thing's going to be powerful. And then, you just kind of forget about it. You see these couple peaks here and there. And some of my Maxi friends are, like just raging about it. And, it's...
Your friends are like Marty.
Oh yeah, he's my business partner. And like, he's like, it's damaging the state chain. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? Like, how does it damage it? Do you have to put a Band-Aid on it? Like what, any of this stuff. But like, I mean, I get their points of like, well, it's my node is working overtime. Like, dude, buy an extra hard drive. Like what, there's this because there's so much more data now. And this is, anyway, no one even pays attention to it. I can't even tell you. I have like multiple nodes. I don't look at any of the stuff. So yeah. And then like when it kind of launched, there was this like interesting, kind of splitting of folks who would consider themselves maxis, which I would, and yet I still saw like the use cases of ordinals and being a good thing. And then more importantly, as a miner, I'm thinking like, oh man, there's like a way for us to essentially like get a cheat code going into like the halvening, because if there's this like robust fee market, it changes the dynamics of people's ASIC allocations, where you're going to plug machines in. And so anyway, that's just exciting. And I like the fact that like it's a stress test for Bitcoin. Like if ordinals ruins Bitcoin, like we were all wasting our time anyway. So like, let's just get it out of the way and, go from there. And it's coming around. We're at the Nashville Energy and Mining Summit, and there was no ordinals panels at this conference. Which is a shame, but I have a prediction. It will definitely be next year, because every side conversation I've been in, someone's bringing it up. And it's usually not the pro ordinals people. They just know I'm like friendly adjacent to it. And they're just like, hey, what do you think about it? Before, you weren't allowed to challenge that orthodoxy. So it's spreading. I think like obviously the economic incentives are really good. And ultimately, like if miners are, big advocates for ordinals, I think it's a great thing. I think you'll start seeing like integrated ordinal related stuff into like mining companies, the way that they market themselves. It might be, for ill-gotten gains or whatnot, but that's typically what you're going to see.
I think one of the bets that the Ethereum ecosystem made that was correct was the price of hard drives would go down exponentially. Mm-hmm. We've mostly seen that, right? Yep. So like, I think for ordinals and ordinal enjoyers, like we're kind of catching on to that and being like, yeah, that's good. Like we want to join in that bandwagon. Yeah. Now, like the cost of like RAM or computation, all that stuff is still pretty expensive. So that's sort of the bottleneck. I think the Ethereum crowd is like figuring that out right now. Mm-hmm. Especially when you see like most sort of nodes are based in like Berlin super hubs as opposed to Bitcoiners. And I think that's the cool thing is we get the best of both worlds where it's not super intensive to like have ordinals inscriptions out onto it, but we still have like the ability to just store them on a laptop or onto a node pretty easily.
Absolutely.
But that's an aside. We should go back to the beginning and allow you to like kind of tell your story with Standard Bitcoin and who you are for those who are not familiar.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Masiero started in Bitcoin kind of by accident. I think a lot of folks kind of start by accident. I was working in a software company out of Boston. And around 2015, 2016, we got approached by Roger Ver to build out, we were a software company that basically made like an advertising skin directly for websites. So like you could go on this website and like our skin of our software would allow you to buy advertising directly. And we did all the magic behind the scenes on how many impressions it did. And he was like, hey, I want that for Bitcoin.com, but I wanted to accept Bitcoin only, not credit cards. And we were a small company, so we were like, all right, cool, we'll build it out. And eventually he was like, he came back, he loved it. And he was like, look, I'm like an investor in all these other companies like blockchain.com, CoinDesk, CoinGecko, I mean, just all the big ones. And so kind of pre-pump in 2017, I was kind of in charge of like developing this cryptocurrency vertical inside that company. And I didn't really know anything about cryptocurrency. I was like a hardcore Ethereum guy because I got into Ethereum spring of 2016 when it like, I think it was like $12 or $13 when I first heard about it. And like, when you get in around that time, like the rise, I think it went to like $200 or $300 within like a month or two. It was like insane. And so I was like, I thought Vitalik was God, literally. I mean, I had this newsletter where it was just like, worshiping Vitalik. And I got orange pill because I just saw these like pretty, like kind of the maxi clout crowd that's out there right now. They were going after Vitalik and basically saying like all, the attacks of like, hey, this isn't actually what he's saying it is. And I was like, well, look, it's obviously, look at what it's doing. The prices are accumulating. And I watched an interview with Chris DeRose from Bitcoin Uncensored, which I don't know how many people are like old school, but like their stuff was awesome. Even when Jenseth was doing it, but he did an interview with Vlad Zamfir, and Vlad Zamfir was like at this hotel room and he's like being interviewed and he's like on his knees, like on like a chair. And Chris DeRose isn't like a developer or any type of big brain. And he was just asking him simple questions regarding, this idea of like, Ethereum claims of like being able to be this like supercomputer, and it's gone through like a multiple iterations. And anyways, like I just saw like the sweat start coming down his face, and like he was like, well, I'm actually not even a developer and neither is Vitalik. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, like these guys don't even know how to code. And it was like Emperor has his clothes off moment. So I caught that orange pill right before like the Bitcoin fork wars. And so it was like a wild time because I had no idea what was going on, and kind of got, that's where I developed my relationship with Marty, because like Bitcoin Twitter was really small back then, and he had just started his newsletter and the band. And this is like, late 2017 or early 2017. And we started working together at that ad company, and that ad company took in, like during that ICO phase, it was, I mean, if you were into crypto at that point, it was the most insane. We've never witnessed anything as crazy as that bull market, at least, in my period, even with like the last ramp up. So we accumulated a lot of Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything like that. And we would pay out the publishers and fiat. So they were happy. And so what does someone do when they haven't been into this for a long time? They're like, oh, well, how can I continue to make more of this magical internet money? And so I was like surfing the web, and I was like, I came across this, the GRC hash tank. Do you remember that thing? It was like it was like the first immersion hash tank or mining tank container. And I sent it to Todd, who's the owner of BSA, and he was the owner of Great American Mining. I sent it to him, and I was like, dude, we got to get this, man. Like, look at this thing. It prints Bitcoin. We have our own money printer. And he was like, let's buy one. And so we went out, we bought 100 Dragon Mints at the top of the bull. Nice. Like right at 20 grand. And, we waited for months. I got to go into this like hotel room at like the North American Bitcoin conference in 2018 to get a sneak peek to make sure I was getting like an actual machine. Cause like at that time, no one knew what was going on with it. And so at that point, it was kind of like a skunkworks project inside that company. And we're like, all right, well, what do we do? We got to figure out how to plug these things in. And it's just like, that's the rabbit hole it started. And eventually having difficulty finding places to plug it in led us to, essentially trying to find, you're always trying to find free power as close as you can to get it. And one of the guys that we worked with, Reed and Asic, who are currently at Cathedra, were our first two hires at Great American Mining. And Reed has an oil and gas background. And his wife is involved in the oil and gas industry in Utah. And, basically she was like, hey, I have a client or a member of our association who's getting fined by the EPA for flare violations for his frack water that, basically there's like residue in the water that he's pulling off of these sites. Can you help him? Because we had seen some, Steve Barber was talking about some of this stuff and everything. And, we had some challenges. We've been going at it for almost a year and a half. Yeah. Very, very difficult. We've lost a lot of money doing it. And Steve had his stuff out there, but he wasn't selling anything at that point. Yeah. And so we were basically going to be like, look, we're just going to end up just buying some boxes from Steve when he stands up his business. And, hey guys, the experiment's over. But we basically said to him, hey, you got 3 months to figure out like how to make this work. And, if not, we're just going to go in this direction. So within that 3 months, that's when we rolled up our pilot project at that flare site. And it was just like really rando guy came over and was like looking at it. And he took this video on his flip phone or whatever and sent it to a colleague. 2017, not flip phone. Yeah, it was like a rude. It wasn't even like an iPhone or something, but he just took this like really grainy video, and he sent it to a colleague in North Dakota, and this girl was actually at this flaring conference, and she like walked right up to the Marathon Oil, not CEO, but someone pretty high up there, and was like, oh, hey, could you guys use this? Because like flaring was like a big deal, and she was like, gave her card, and she's like, tell whoever that is to like contact us. Yeah. And so like, it was just, we had no business like being able to do that. And we kind of built out our own first GAN box at that point. We had like some video that went viral of like the first time it went live at night, and there's like these lights, it's aesthetically, flare mining is like amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I've done some fun stuff with the J guys.
Dude. Yes.
To like film there.
Yeah.
Say why it's this Wyoming Powder Range basin is beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. It actually made Bitcoin, in my opinion, it actually makes Bitcoin mining cool. Because when you see most on-grid sites, you're kind of like, oh,
it's like boring.
Yeah. It's like a glorified, like, it looks like a storage unit essentially, that makes noise. So those sites were just, they're very pleasing aesthetically. And then you're doing like a net benefit, and it was a really powerful tool as far as like a narrative angle to go after ESG, because ESG was coming after Bitcoin miners, and like we had this like amazing tool. So really just got started right around the same time that Crusoe, Upstream, we all basically, they were maybe about 6 months ahead of us. And then it was just like a wild ride. I had to go through the April 2020 crash. That was wild. And then, then getting ready for that next bull. And, you go from, 500 kilowatts to deploy to like 20 megawatts in like a year and a half, all distributed. So it was a wild ride.
So you brought up the Crusoe thing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So there's that lawsuit.
I have no idea if you're involved at all.
No, not on that.
Do you have any opinions on all that? Because it seems like everyone was coming to market with a very similar times. A light bulb was going on in different places.
Yeah.
Which that
Happens in the history.
Yeah.
It's always messy on the other side of it.
Yeah, I would say like my views have kind of like evolved since initially, because it's very, you know, especially Bitcoiners, we like paint categories. It's very black or white. You know, those are bad guys, these are good guys. I think like over time that I realized that like both those guys or both those companies are essentially, you know, just setting up moats for themselves. I don't believe, in my opinion, that either one of them want to use them in an offensive manner. Yeah. And so I think, you know, whatever happens with the lawsuit or however it works out, I think it'll probably come down to be pretty amicable at the end of the day, which, you know, Bitcoiners would love like all the drama up and around there. Yeah. But yeah, that's like I guess not really a hot take, because like it took a while, because like it was really easy during that time to be like to paint Crusoe as the bad guy. But if you look at the lawsuit that they filed against somebody else, it wasn't, in the meat of it, it was not on the basis of someone going after their patent or kind of like infringing on that. It had more to do with like it was more economic based on them losing a deal. And like, yeah. So like, I get it. Like, man, if that's a pretty big deal for that to happen. So anyways, I think, yeah, it's been kind of quiet, honestly, about that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, there's like multiple Lancium ones. That seems like that one's a little bit more different, because I think from everyone that I've talked to about it, you know, Lancium at least has the perception of being more predatorial about it. And I think, yeah, that's a different animal when it comes to dealing with
We need to have like a PvP match, get these people on the podcast and like go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure the lawyers will allow that to happen.
No, they would.
Yeah, they would not like that.
Okay, let's go back to Standard Bitcoin now. Okay. Like kind of profile of it. This is your time to shill for... No
shilling. I'm a private miner. I don't need to shill. It's not like, you know, I'm not out trying to raise money or anything like that. But in between leaving GAM, I went and worked with the team at Cathedra. A bunch of us went over there. Marty was on the board. Drew and AJ joined from Galaxy, and then a bunch of like all my coworkers came over as well. And it was just, you know, kind of timed at you know, it was tough because it was like right at the peak in 21, and then things started going down. And anyways, my job there was to find a home for the 7,000 J Pros and XPs that they had bought on futures orders. And that, you know, that became like a difficult problem to solve, especially with like difficulty going up and, you know, just like price not going in the right direction. And so like that led me to like, we had to kind of switch up our strategy, because we were originally going to be like the off-grid, you know, angle on that side. We couldn't do it. The Ukraine deal from a geopolitical perspective forced all of basically the oil and gas market came alive again. And there was a period from like 2020 to like late 2021 where you could rent power generators, natural gas generators, for like the equivalent of like 2 to 2.5 cents all in, which like if you can get a site up and running quickly, like it was a cheat code. I mean, obviously you couldn't scale, but or scale is easy, but it was a great way to deploy hash rate like very cheaply. But that switched overnight because all of these generator companies now had their longtime customers back, and they didn't have to deal with these like, you know, bottom cost, like, you know, ruthless Bitcoin miners who were just like bleeding them out. And now they could charge, you know, 3 times the rate to their oil and gas customers. So that advantage went away really quick. And so, you know, a lot of people had to switch up their strategies. We had to find hosting for a lot of the machines. And so kind of in that process, you know, I saw companies that got exposed to debt financing for miners throughout the spectrum, and just saw like what happened because of it. And so I had this like thing ingrained in the back of my head of like, I never want to have exposure to a lot of ASICs moving forward when I try to scale up a Bitcoin mining business. And so while I left, so like in between Cathedra and Standard Bitcoin, had this like epiphany moment with Marty, because I was like, dude, when we started this thing at Great American Mining, we were going to like plug in our own machines. It wasn't really supposed to be a business. It was more of this like project. And I was like, dude, we got to do something. So like, I just moved to Tennessee. We have some natural gas wells like in my area. And I was like, Steve, I want to order a 50 kilowatt, hash hut. And we ordered one. We bought M30S pluses at the top of the bull. I think we paid like $95 a T for it. Like literally the worst situation you could do. And we were like, all right, we're going to do like Fight Club for Bitcoin mining and plug them in. And it was awesome because like that first 50 kilowatt off-grid site, you learn all of like the friction points of being able to plug things in, or like, hey, why won't the pool take? And there's these like, just you have to go through the process of like friction. And so we did that, and once that bug is in you, you're like, oh, if we did one, why can't we do more? There's more gas. So, we bought some more, and then like, I had an opportunity coming down off the bull in 2022, where in 21 and 22, insane build outs were happening, insane capital allocation. Miners were flying their machines in on 747s to like, it was crazy. You were at Compass too, like everybody's printing money. It was just wild. And so there was a lot of infrastructure in the United States, transformers, containers, switchgear, that literally got mothballed like overnight in the summer of 2022. And so there was like kind of an opportunity to build out sites going from, instead of paying $500,000 or $600,000 per megawatt, you could do sub 200. And that changes the economics of building a site pretty dramatically, because if you're a hoster, you can pretty much guarantee that you can get your site paid back in less than a year, if you run your business right. And so, whereas before a lot of folks were paying those large amounts for building out a site, but we're also prop mining. And so they were just like, they're kind of like rolling the dice on that side of things. So yeah, we built out an on-grid site and funded it via a miner broker sale. And so like, I didn't want to go into debt. I didn't want to have like a lot of employees. We just, it was like all of these things that were like scars. I was like, oh, I don't want to have any of these things.
It's the only way to mine Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like one thing, there was like a thought exercise when I was at Cathedra, where we were talking one day in group chat, and I was like, because you're always trying to think of like, what's our edge? How can we compete? And like, it's really hard in the public mining market because everyone can buy the same price. Like there's
commodity.
It's really tough. And so I was like, well, how can we mine Bitcoin without owning an Asic? And it was like, whoa, how do you think about that? And then I was like, as we were building out that first site, kind of doing it by myself and with the group I'm with, I realized like, oh, that's the cheat code right there. Because if I can build what Adam Back would call like the best chicken shack miner, if I could build the best, cheapest chicken shack miner, I could have an advantage of getting some access to hash rate on my, on the hosting rates that I had, in like, I don't have to buy any ASICs. And so, so we started doing these like small, I call them small, but small, relatively speaking, to large Bitcoin miners, let's say 10 to 20 megawatt on-grid sites, primarily in like the southeast, air-cooled, very bare bones, no crazy like remote monitoring or anything like that. And what is different about our model is we primarily just build the sites, and the only maintenance we do on the sites is like actually on like the containers or the infrastructure. The teams that come in and mine, they have their own ops team, and we were basically sort of like a landlord that they pay at the end of the month their rent to. So it's just anybody who's like had to monitor Bitcoin mines, or especially anyone who's had to do off-grid stuff, you're constantly like, oh, I just got a ping that my generator went down. Now we got to like have somebody go out and restart it and all this other. I was like, I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. So and it was a great, like, you'll notice here, there's like a lot of companies that the Giga guys, for example, have been building through this bear market. A lot of companies have been building through this bear market, and a lot of folks who have like infrastructure and rack space as like a core competency I think are in a really, really good position moving forward.
Hey listeners, let's talk about revolutionizing your mining operation with Foreman.
This isn't your average management tool. It's an all-in-one solution for reducing costs and significantly boosting your revenue. Foreman brings a cutting-edge dashboard to your fingertips, empowering you with automated energy strategies. This means not only curtailing around real-time prices, but also strategically enhancing your profit margins through demand response. It's about leveraging energy efficiency to its fullest potential. With Foreman, you get a system that scales with your business. Inventory management for assets, infrastructure integration, and business intelligence. Foreman elevates the cash flow and production of your entire operation. To see how Foreman can redefine your mining operation standards, visit foreman.mn. With Foreman, you're not just managing a mining operation, you're setting a new standard in the industry. Okay, I want to talk about that strategy a little more. A lot of people are trying to play ASIC games, which you've kind of opted out of by allowing to work with like either manufacturers or other like larger people who have an interest in that. Do they ever come back to you and are like questioning why you're kind of playing that strategy for it, and they're like thinking that you're kind of like outworking them there, or just typically they're just like, yeah?
I mean, no, I actually like the relationship is like very symbiotic because folks who have like spent, I mean, if you think about like the deployment of capital for normally to set up a Bitcoin mine, 80 to 90% of it is on the ASIC side. So they're just happy that someone can provide, you know, that rack space because they know that like it's really difficult to do, you know, for the most part at scale. So no, we don't, especially if like it's a situation where there's not a lot of like OpEx for them. It's kind of like a no-brainer. So no, they're just looking to deploy. And if they can get their hash rate online, I think that's the other thing too, is that when you have a co-hosting client, the expectation, especially for us, is we want to get them online as soon as possible, because they're getting machines at a certain time that we need to make sure that they're plugged in, and then keeping them running as consistently as we possibly can, because like the way that the power rates work, like if you've got boxes that aren't working right, you've got machines going on and off, it plays with your demand charges. It basically makes you more efficient. So like we're kind of aligned, because when we're making the most money off the cost per kilowatt is when things are running as smooth as they can. And obviously what they want is just worry-free operation. So, you know, the months from like, let's say October through April, up here in Tennessee and Kentucky, is like, it's great. My phone doesn't ring off the hook or anything like that. But like last year was like our first real full summer through things down here. And, you know, there were some challenges that took place. So.
Okay, I want to talk about TVA, and I want to talk about who you're working with on the hosting side, like who's coming in to fill this rack space.
Yeah.
Or even just in Tennessee in general.
Mm-hmm.
There's been like minor mag reports about that. We've just kind of seen like a lot of ASICs been flowing from Bitmain and other providers into like the southeast region of the US.
Yeah.
Do you working with counterparties like that, or do you know of counterparties who are kind of?
Yeah, I mean, there's like different, if you think about like I would say like the counterparty side of like hosting, there's definitely like a couple different buckets, right?
Yeah.
You know, we have like what I would consider enterprise level customers, you know, some publicly traded miners, some like well-known financial firms that are in like kind of the Bitcoin space. So like we'll handle their stuff. And of course it's on relationship based, like people we've known for a while. And then the manufacturing side is, you know, in a bear market for a miner manufacturer, like they have to still figure out how to like order more chips and keep the assembly lines going. And so there's a pretty robust, I would say, some plans that are put in place on Bitmain and WhatsMiner's side, where they'll facilitate like self mining that is sort of like a group sale to like larger customers, but it allows them to you know, make money on those machines for like 6 months, and then have like a predetermined buyer of those machines that are already plugged in, which it kind of goes back to how they used to run things in China in previous markets, where in bear cycles, they like mining manufacturers loved it because they could go plug in at like 2 or 3 cent power in China and just hash like crazy with machines that aren't released to anybody. And then once the market picked up, they clean them off and, you know, send them over here to people. And so like they use self mining as a tool to basically get the margins that they know they need to get out of those machines no matter what. And like, I don't think any other manufacturing business has that ability to do that. So yeah, there's like I would say a pretty robust market of like that type of stuff going on.
It makes sense. I don't have much more input on that front, but it has been like a headline for the last few weeks for a lot of people talking about that.
Yeah. I mean, like I think what's funny is like there's going to be, I think like a lot of the small to medium size industrial scale miners, so like let's say 10 megawatts plus, I think there's going to be like 2 points that take place. I think that they'll do okay for like the time period of like whatever this bull cycle is. But in order to really scale, because of the public markets and what public miners are doing and like their ability to just order like a lot of machines at once, doing it like a traditional way as a private miner, you're just kind of rolling over your profits. And, you know, it's more of like the turtle kind of pace with things. So I think they're going to get boxed out. I think there's going to be there could be a lot of like M&A on that side of things, because in order to get new machines, they're going to have to do some type of like liquidation. And so there's going to be a lot of like changing hands there, which that happens in most cycles anyway. So, but where I think like the TVA side of things comes into thing, or not just TVA in general, but let's just say like all of middle America, you can go from, let's say, as far east as Ohio, and then as far west as like Wyoming. And pretty much any Republican or conservative state, for the most part, energy prices that you're going to get for a Bitcoin miner is in like the 4 to 5 cent range. You can do some like creative, elaborate structures with like off peak and things like that. But like if you want to run 24/7, that's kind of the range. And so there's, you know, for the most part, there's a lot of opportunities there. I think with the ETF and with like, you know, like grids like ERCOT and now TVA being here and having a voice, I think there's going to be a lot of validation at the lower utility level that allows much more growth in this area for these, like, I call them like sub, 10 to 15 megawatt sites, where there's so many of these rural substations that were set up for either like a manufacturing plant or something like that, where they've got the ability, they've got the power right there, where they've been afraid to like deal with the Bitcoin miners. There's been like some stigma, and now that like, you know, Uncle Larry's got the ETF approved, and you're starting to see signaling from the power industry that this is actually a good thing, especially with like curtailment and demand response, that I think is going to open up like a really, like a lot of opportunities for people to, and I think it's a good thing for Bitcoin. There's going to be, exactly. Cause like the big Bitcoin miners, they don't want that. They're like, they shy away from it. They'd much rather have their mega mine, and because it's easier to operate.
Yeah. Which brings me back to something I think you brought up to me 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, about Texas energy prices. And so I want to get your opinion on that, at least for the record, because I think it's counterintuitive than most people's, at least the claims the industry puts out.
Yeah, well, I think you're starting to see it now. Like Bitmain themselves do not like doing business in Texas. A lot of the Chinese miners that came in, there's some groups that got just absolutely like wrecked. There's like graveyards of sites that are out in West Texas because of this, and like really big builds, like 300 megawatt builds and stuff. There was a lot of devil in the details in terms of how it was presented to Bitcoin miners. It's like, oh, ERCOT's this great place to come Bitcoin mining, and it's super easy to get these, like, you know, they'd show off these like sub 2 cent price, opportunities. But like when you actually peel back the onion, you're like paying these massive bonds to participate in some of these programs. And you have to have a level of sophistication to be able to integrate all of these things. And then you're paying out a ton of CapEx to do immersion or water cooled. And then at the end of the day, like the blended rate for a lot of these folks, if you ask like people who are plugged in there, it's like, yeah, with our uptime, it ends up being like 5 cents or, something like that. And so it's like, okay, well, now you're mining in a place that's super hot. You've got this weird relationship with like intermittent energy that I think is not really great for the grid down there. And, a lot of people spend capital there, but I think, a lot of other miners just said, okay, yeah, it may be in TVA, it's not easy to go set up a 200 megawatt site. In Texas, it is. Like you can literally buy land next to a large, some power lines, and if you know the right game, like you can build your own substation. So like there's that ability to like, oh, hey, I want to scale, I can do it down here in Texas. But when you're making investments into ASICs and you're running them in that kind of weather, I feel like a lot of folks don't like talk about like the how does that impact your ROI when you're going to have to deal with all these failures on your machines and things like that. So especially after last summer, our summers here are, mild compared to what they have to deal with. And we're air cooled, and we have, we've kind of like have like this, approach where we try to do hot, cold aisles, kind of like containment, because that's the best way to get it out. But at the end of the day, like that month and a half of like, let's say early July through like mid-August just wreaked so much havoc on our machines, on our PDUs, on our switch gear. I mean, then there's even situations where it's affecting, like when you have machines going on and off, then there's like weird balances that mess with your transformers, and you start noticing your transformers are getting warm, and you're like, whoa, I didn't know I signed up for this. So, I think there's something to like setting, because that goes back to like the prior era of Bitcoin mining when, you've had some guests on who've done like a lot of mining in the, like Iceland and stuff. Like the fact that you could just like leave machines on for the most part and never have to worry. Yeah. Like there has to be some type of quotient, or I guess like calculation of like, Bitcoin mine lost opportunity in situations like that. So
I want to go to the power grid part really quickly, and then we'll wrap up with the Chinese national thing, which we were talking about before. Sure. So why do you think it's bad for the grid to be mining that scenario down Texas, intermittent with?
Yeah. So, and Marty and I are like really aligned on this point too. It's like the subsidies that are essentially making the Texas ERCOT grid unreliable are for like wind and solar generation, because they have these like renewable energy credits that basically fund a lot of this build out. Well, what's happening is now Bitcoin miners are taking advantage of that, and it's like kind of pouring fuel on or gasoline on the fire. And so that's like, oh, we can actually perpetuate more of these build outs. And what they actually need in Texas is stable base load, which was some of the conversation here from the TVA CEO. And so, I actually don't think it's a net good. Like if you look at historical Texas ERCOT rates for consumers, originally how it was spun was, ERCOT mining, it's like this great relationship. It's great for the grid. It's great for consumers. But if you look at pricing for consumers, it's actually gone up, and it's actually gone up. Now, I can't say it's like a direct correlation, but it's always presented as like, it's this net benefit to the grid. And I don't necessarily agree, to who at the grid? At ERCOT, because they're getting paid more, but not to the end consumer when you live in a really hostile weather environment there. And if it gets really cold, there's not infrastructure to like keep people warm. And then if it gets really hot and you lose electricity, people die too. So like either way, like it's like a very fragile system. And, I think that's why you're starting to see like some miners like get out of there. There's probably some political risk too. Like there was like this story of, I'm not trying to dog on Riot or anything. It was like just really unfortunate timing. They like announced their earnings, and like that day there's like a crazy brownout, and like the news catches the clip because they're kind of bragging about it. And then like you see these like reports of legislative like insiders in Texas are like, hey, the governor is like insanely upset about like how this is a story because it's making him look bad. And like just thinking about like if there's enough pressure on any political person, I don't care what side of the aisle they're on, all it takes is a swift of the pen, and like that whole industry goes away. And they did do some sweeping changes to like a lot of the ERCOT policies and stuff, which completely changed the economics around building out sites there. So you want something stable, not in a position where it's going to change a lot. And
because all these things are quasi-government agencies, right? Like ERCOT has PUCs. Yeah, so like it's a quasi-government agency. Okay, let's finish off, since you have to run to your panel soon here, talking about the Chinese national security thing that's been going on lately. The context for this, and we talked about this on the show, I think when it happened on like our news segment, was there was a small 5 megawatt mine in China, Wyoming, maybe it was 10 megawatts, that Microsoft wrote a report about, sent to the DOJ or the DOD, and was like, this is a threat to your missile bases. And then news picked it up and said, Microsoft says Chinese nationals are a threat to U.S. nuclear bases. And so that ran its course.
Right.
I have seen a lot of Bitcoin CEOs or Bitcoiner mining CEOs be okay with that. And I think it's because like it's competition to have these other guys come in. What's your
Oh, you mean like that narrative of like?
Yeah, they're okay with it.
Yeah.
I think they're okay with it because I think they know that they can work with the Microsofts of the world. And then they know that Chinese nationals probably can't because there's just going to be discrimination right out the gate.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should be careful what you wish for, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like the ESG narrative. Like once you start kowtowing to it and like, trying to like adopt it, which we saw, and I mean, I think I was on the right, we were on the right side of that argument. The same thing is going to happen with this. Like if this is like a guilt by association thing, then if you accept it, they're going to be, it's never, that's why it's like that saying, like never apologize, like when the mob comes after you, because they're going to say, oh, that's not good enough. You have spy machines plugged in. It doesn't even matter if you're a Chinese national or not. Like now you've got these like crazy spy boxes and, like these, they're like, what, how is this even possible? And like, now they've already painted like, the balloons going overhead and freak people out. And now it's like, so it's really hard to put that genie back in the bottle. And like, the thing is like our entire industry is very fragile in the sense that like, I know some of the manufacturing has moved offshore, but at this, at the same time, like it's very reliant upon the Chinese like ecosystem. And so, I just think it's important for Bitcoin miners to say, hey, we're a very pro-freedom oriented country. And the fact is like Bitcoin miners that are coming here to the US are essentially refugees from China. Yeah. They had businesses that were legally operating there and they literally got rug pulled, and they've come over here to set up in a place where we have, property rights and things like that are really good for pro-freedom. We should be embracing these digital refugees instead of like, kind of mischaracterizing them and having these like reports. Like it's very like, you can like, I'm glad you pointed out like, or made the distinction of like Microsoft put this stuff out there, because at the end of the day, Bitcoin miners are competing against large data centers. And there's like this whole race. There's, I think that, the CEO of NVIDIA recently basically made this claim, like the AI game is essentially like the world becomes like a gigantic data center and it's just all about power. So, they're trying to go out and procure 500, like their small sites for GPU compute is 500 megawatts. That's like a small, site. So they're trying to get gigawatts and gigawatts. Well, now we're in like Bitcoin miners are in direct competition with, with the likes of Microsoft. So I think you just have to see like, okay, who has an economic incentive to make sure that they're boxing out the competition.
It reminds me a lot of like what happened in the 1870s and 1880s with Chinese coming into California and trying to like set up life. We're just seeing like a resurgence of that, right? So like they came over California, quickly set up some acts that they couldn't take jobs, they couldn't be part of certain industries. And now it's like a very shameful part of California's history. And I see very similar ties. And of course, the whole point goes back to China being a communist country. Mm-hmm. And yet everything around is like very weak links. It's always like this person
is shadowy. Yeah, we're not sure like where it is.
Addictions, the CCP somehow. Right. So that I think is something to not be a part of at the very least. Okay, we're wrapping up here because you have to run, but we have to get a hash rate projection from you for 2024. So this time next year, well, December 2024, where are we going to be at? Double. Okay, 550. So 11,100 zettahash, 1.1 zettahash.
There's just a lot of new generation machines coming in, and just
that's
if
the
you.
Highest someone's ever said on the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you just look at the deployment, like if you look at like what a 10 megawatt site did 2 years ago, as far as like exahash, you'd be lucky to get like 200 petahash on a 10 megawatt site. Now with S21s, 10 megawatt sites like 650 petahash. Yeah. And so like I would think 10 megawatts in like another 8 or 9 months, that's going to be at an exahash. So there's plenty of like that power available. There's going to be a lot of fleet kind of like refreshing, but I also think there's going to be homes for a lot of like the existing stuff out there. And so, yeah, I just think like it's just going to get more and more bullish, especially if we enter a bull market. That's all with the pretext of we are going into a bull market. So it will get nuts.
I hope we're going to a bull market.
And I'd gladly be wrong and not doubling. I can't look like a terrible person. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the hard part. Like you get a little greedy because you're making all the money in like the safe part of the market, or it's almost like steady income. But then, You're like, because that's kind of what did Corin and some of these other guys was they were primarily hosting, and then they got into the bull cycle, and they're like, crap, we're missing out on all this. We've got all the rack space, so let's get into prop mining, and then what happened. So yeah, you got to just
stick with your strategy.
Yeah, and or just be really smart about how you are going to, because like the miner financing debt angle is not going to be around or as big this cycle, so you're going to have to be very different about or have different strategies of like how you're going to scale even with debt into the future. So
perfect. Tom, thanks for joining.
Awesome. Always great, and just love what you're doing with the pod. I think you're like on the cutting edge with like kind of where this industry is going, and look, just continue success. Appreciate it. Yeah.